anyone can start at real estate at any point in any time. You got to have good credit and income history and employment. So, take care of the baby steps first, but anybody can get into real estate. Anybody can do flipping.
Welcome everyone to the Closing Table Podcast, real accounts from real estate professionals, brought to you by WindowStill. I'm your host, Kat Schooler, and today I'm sitting down with real estate agent Jonathan Hayes. Jonathan is an agent with Braille Realty out in Suffield, Connecticut. And today, Jonathan and I sit down and he shares his journey into real estate, from learning some tough lessons in his first investment property to becoming an agent himself, getting into sales, and now being a successful flipper. Jonathan also highlights the importance of taking advantage of state-funded programs such as Connecticut's Time to Own and how it can help people get into their first homes. Jonathan also hits on the importance of having hobbies and a full life outside of real estate. So without further ado, let's talk to Jonathan. Jonathan, thank you so much for joining me today. I would love to kick off our conversation with how you started your journey in real estate.
Of course, my pleasure. So I was actually an electrical apprentice when I got my toes wet in real estate. My dad, before that, was a contractor. He had moved out to Colorado, so I was looking to find my own way. And I always liked working on houses, and I like computers too, so I figured electrical would be a little bit better place to start. Well, in the class I was taking for electrical, we had some downtime. I ended up reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and I was like, I don't know if I want to be doing this anymore. So when they say everything happens for a reason, I ended up tearing my ACL while I was working as an electrical apprentice and needed money. I mean, I was on disability for a while, but I wanted to plan for the future. I didn't want to keep doing that. So after learning about cash flow, having more assets than liabilities, just having your money work for you in general, I didn't really want to work till I was dead. And I already seeing the damage I'd done to my body, I decided that I needed to get into real estate. So before I even got my license, my stepdad had passed away. Not my father, the contractor. My stepdad had passed away and left me some money, and I was able to buy a $72,000 little project on Coventry Lake. It's a lake in Connecticut, and this was a little cabin I bought in big need of repair. I jumped the gun a little bit there. I went with my emotions, and I didn't really do enough research money wise on that project, so I ended up losing like 15 grand. I sold it for 72, which is the same as I bought it for, but with closing costs, holding costs. Never even got to work on the thing because it was 103 years old. So anything over 100 years old, you get historical. It's so much paperwork to jump through. So make sure it's not over 100 years old. But regardless, I sold it for the same price I got it for, so I didn't lose out too heavily. Then I decided to get my license, get more involved in in real estate, see what other people were doing, so that I could make more informed decisions and make some more money in the sphere without doing the flips. And that led me to my second purchase, which was a foreclosure auction. Got in Windsor Locks, Connecticut. I won for $230,000. ARV at that time was about $280,000. I ended up selling it for $330,000. So did really well on that one. I did everything myself except for the carpets and the siding, which that's where I knew I could win, because I knew I know how to do most things. So that's where that's been my greatest success. In the meantime, I've had about 6 sales. It's only a year and a half since I've gotten my license. So 6 sales in that time for new agents, pretty good. Between my flipping and the stuff that I post, a lot of people who I went to school with, who I do martial arts with, who I have wrestled with. I'm very involved in the martial arts community in Connecticut. I fought semi-professionally at the Big E. I fought Glover Teixeira as a UFC ex-champion. I fought one of his students. So there's a lot of people who reach out to me for real estate advice in any circumstance, because I've been so involved in the flips and whatnot. So I got my start by wanting to achieve financial freedom, reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, as well as The Richest Man in Babylon. I forget who the author of that one is, but it's an excellent book for financial education. It teaches about you tithe to yourself, basically. So people will tithe to a church or tithe to a religious organization. If you can afford that, which everyone can, you'd be surprised. 10% of all your income, put it to the side. You can afford 10% to yourself. So when they say pay yourself first, it means anytime you have money coming in, take 10% of that, put it away, and don't use it unless it's going to make you more money. That's how you start building the pile. That's how you start achieving financial freedom and have your money work for you. So all of those little lessons that I learned and all the failures that I had up to that point have put me where I am now, where I'm on my second foreclosure purchase. I bought it for $218,000 and it's currently worth $350,000. So even better situation than the last one.
Wow, it sounds like you are achieving such great success. I'm curious, so did you get your license to initially to sell the flips, or you wanted to sell real estate in addition to flipping? Kind of what was the thought process there?
I wanted to be involved in any way that I could. So, of course, saving myself the buyer's agent commission on my flips is a draw to it. But also being a buyer's agent for all of my friends looking for their first houses, I get to see what's on the market. I get a great feel for the market. Who's in Connecticut, for example, East sellers are in a great position right now. There's multiple offers on every property. So, being a buyer's agent, knowing that I had very good leverage being the seller because I knew what the situation was for everybody else. But I just feel like being involved in the most ways possible is the best service to not only myself but also to my clients. Because if I have flip houses, if I buy houses at foreclosure, if I represent sellers and buyers, I have the most information possible to give them the best advice possible.
Certainly, and I definitely see that and see the value in having done renovations yourself. You can then be an advocate for that for your client. You can be like, well, this is a pretty easy, pretty small time commitment, small money commitment type of a renovation, or this is a very large one, and that's something that you need to consider. You need to have funds for or time for to do it yourself.
Right. So there's a good example of that. I actually just sold my roommate a house, and the basement floor was gross carpet and unfinished. I was able to help him do some snap-on flooring, $1,500, did his whole basement. I would say the value out of the house value there is 10-20,000 at least. So you want to have some room in your house where you can add some sweat equity, especially as a first time home buyer, where you can just, I'm going to knock out this project in a couple weekends, or if you have some friend, maybe a weekend, and add some initial equity to your home. Nothing, you don't want a rotten sill plate, you don't want water damage in the roof, you don't want mold, you want, this needs new paint, this needs new trim, this area of siding is melted and we need to redo it. And yeah, like you said, I am very good at spotting things that are easily fixable but not going to break the bank in terms of a first time home buyer.
So, what is your approach to working with clients and building those relationships?
Well, a lot of the people that I have for clients currently I'm only 23. So a lot of people have they're either just getting out of college or they're working in the trades and they've been working for a couple of years and getting their first home. So most of the transactions I've done have been younger people buying their first home. I think I excel in that area because I've done a couple flips. I bought houses at foreclosure that have, people have lost out on their mortgages and had to lose their homes. So I'm very wary of, I explain people to be wary of their financial situation. If you've only been working a job for 2 or 3 years, yes, you can qualify for mortgage, but is this really what you want to be doing for the rest of your life? Are you content with getting up at 9 a.m. every day from now and the next 30 years, So I, I'll give someone advice that I think is going to put them in the best financial situation, even if it means I'm going to lose the sale, because I've had that experience where on my first property that I bought, I thought that the realtor encouraged me a little too much and could have given me better advice that would have led to me having a better relationship with them and going on to buy more properties down the line. I'm more interested in establishing a relationship over the next 20, 30, 40 years, buying your second home, buying your third home, buying your kids' homes, like than making, an extra $5,000 today because I advised you to buy something that you didn't need. So having been in a position where I failed and lost out and been advised purely based on, in my opinion, someone else's greed, I refuse to do that to someone else. I won't, even if it means I'm going to lose a sale or you're not going to buy this house, I'm going to tell you what I think because I value the relationship.
I think that's a great philosophy because you're definitely looking at that long-term thinking. You're not operating from like a scarcity mindset. And I have talked to a lot of agents like yourself who have had a bad transaction, and that kind of inspired them to get into it themselves. They're like, I can do better than this, and I can make things better for people. And I love your philosophy, especially, to have it so early in your professional career view on what it means to own a home. It's it's really easy for people to get lost in the American dream of it all, and not really see the phantom costs of home ownership.
All right, it's called the American Dream for a reason. It's an illusion. Even when you own it, even when you pay it off 100%, you still have property taxes. You're still renting from the government every month.
For sure.
It is what it is. No avoiding death or taxes.
Mhm. John, what would your advice be for first-time homebuyers in this current market?
If you're in Connecticut, you should really look into the time to own program. On my last two transactions, one client I saved $50,000, the other client I saved $25,000. And what time to own is Connecticut is granting first-time home buyers. It was before September 23rd, $50,000, and now it's $25,000 after that. So you can apply it towards the closing cost, the purchase price of the home, anything on one of my clients. We even his earnest money deposit, he put down 5,000, let's say. We included in the contract that time to own will cover that at time to closing, and the earnest money deposit check will be returned to the buyer. So he got his home for $0 out of pocket. The rest went to the down payment for his mortgage, and that went to his earnest money deposit. So literally $0 out of pocket. Just start paying monthly, and that's a myth that a lot of people believe about buying their first home. Is I need to save up 20, 30 grand. I need to save up copious amounts of money to do this. The employment history and the income and the credit is way more important than that. As long as you're able to pay the bill monthly, there are things that can be done. There are grants, there are programs. I'm sure in other states there are different things than time to own, but talk to a mortgage broker, talk to a loan broker. If you're a first time home buyer, they know the programs, and if they don't, find a new one. um, but yeah, if you're in Connecticut, definitely look for time to own. One more piece of advice for first time home buyers: try to see if you can qualify for a multifamily, whether that be through a DSCR loan, if you have a little bit more capital available, or whatever program qualifies in your state. I mean, if it's going to be a little bit more than a single family home, but instead of you bearing the entire brunt of that cost and having your home be a liability, your home is now an asset. You have a person in there, a tenant, who can pay off the majority of your mortgage. I don't know. When I wake up at nine o'clock in the morning, and when I used to wake up at 9 o'clock in the morning, and I have to go to work today, or I won't have food, or I won't have a place to live, that's living in fear constantly. It's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you don't have that established, you're going to be anxious, you're going to be depressed, you're going to have all these chemical imbalances in your brain. If you have a tenant who is responsible for all these things, I just think it takes the weight of the world off your shoulders. I mean, it's infinitely better in terms of my mental health for when I have assets to rely on and I don't have to worry about working just to eat or pay my mortgage, pay my carb note, whatever. I would strongly encourage a first-time home buyer to look at their options in terms of buying an asset instead of a liability. Every situation's different. Sometimes you need a home. Sometimes you got family members to take care of. Completely understand. But if it's in any way on the table for you, I would strongly urge them to go that route.
And then what advice would you have for sellers in today's market?
Hold out for multiple offers, because there will be some. Sometimes you'll get a great offer right off the bat, or before you're coming soon, someone will jump the gun. There's bidding wars, at least on Connecticut. Every market's different. For like Florida right now, sellers, I would say, take anything you could get. Florida's going under. But in Connecticut, where I am, sellers are in a good position. Hold out. Don't be greedy necessarily, but hold out till your open house is done. Make sure you get all the offers in. Give them a chance to compete against each other.
Yeah, I would say from my perspective, it's a similar market here in Michigan. My husband and I are looking right now, and we'd go to an open house and we'd like it, and we'd talk to our agent, and they would be that. They have multiple offers. They're over asking. They're looking for, appraisal gap guarantees, and you're like, good for them. Good for
Yeah, kudos.
them. Jonathan, can you think of a particularly, rewarding transaction out of the ones you've done so far, or one that was really challenging that you learned something from?
So this most recent one, second most recent one with my roommate, I was able to save him the $50,000 from time to own. I'd mentioned previously that on September 23rd, Connecticut no longer offered 50. They went down to 25. So we literally went under contract September 22nd at 8 p.m. The challenge with that is my roommate works night shift. He was at work. He couldn't answer the phone. Get him to update there was something we needed to change on the contract, needed to be updated, and I couldn't get a hold of him. And it was 8 p.m. and I'm like, wow, this needs to be signed by both parties before tonight, or you're going to lose $25,000. So I drove to his work. I started knocking on the door, and he works at the airport. So it's like, security and whatnot. People, who are you? What are you doing here? I'm like, I need to talk to my buddy. This is very important. So I got to him, ended up getting it signed, got it under contract, all set, was able to save a friend of mine $50,000. And I don't see many realtors doing that. I don't see many realtors leaving their house at 8 or 9 o'clock at night and going to an airport and getting in trouble and knocking on doors and stuff to save their friend money. But look, that was a cool one. I was happy I was able to save him that, because Who doesn't want a free 25 grand? And to clarify, it's not free. They forgive 10% every year. So if you stay there 10 years, it is free, but it's 10% every year. So 5 years would be 25, etc. It's interesting if you look at the amortization chart, because when you do a mortgage deal, they give you the amortization, and it's negative. Every payment they're subtracting a little bit. So it's just my lawyer was looking at it, he's like, I've never seen anything like this. So definitely a great program for people to take advantage of in Connecticut.
Yeah, and oh my gosh, so great of you. Like, obviously, this person not only is your client, but is your friend, and it's kind of a great, like, heroic movie style story of you rushing over there and banging on the door, all those things. I'm so glad you were able to make that happen.
Ditto.
And then, John, what advice would you have for people who are looking to get into flipping? You've done a couple of these now. What are some of the things you've learned?
So buying on market isn't really advisable. I mean, anything on market's been looked at over and over and picked at, and if there's an opportunity, it's either going to be gone immediately or greatly diminished by the people bidding in war against it. You pretty much have to look off market, whether that be bank owned REO, foreclosures. What I personally like is foreclosures, or dialing for dollars. I mean, you could pre-foreclosure. You could look at the foreclosures that are coming up and just call those people, go knock on their door, see if you can strike a deal. Some of the best deals are made on the courthouse steps, as Robert Kiyosaki said. So I like foreclosures because it's a little bit more guaranteed than if you make a deal with somebody individually. It's also not occupied. I don't like, well, that depends. You can tell if it's occupied or not. Whereas if it's a pre-foreclosure, it's always going to be occupied. And that's an unfavorable situation. It can be dealt with. You can do cash for keys where you give someone money to leave as long as they sign something and go change the locks immediately. Or you have to do the eviction process, which is long and drawn out, and costs similar money. But it's more the time that you're wasting that is the draw there. So I like foreclosures because you go to the auction, you get a quick look around, you can see what the situation is, and in Connecticut at least, you know what the bank's going to bid. You can see if you go on, and this is what you should do if you want to get into flipping. Go to foreclosures, whatever your state's website for that is. It's ctforeclosures.gov or something for Connecticut. Look at the foreclosure, copy the docket number, and you're going to find the docket number search for Connecticut. I just look up docket number search. I have the link saved, but I'm sure it's different for every state. But you're going to want to find the foreclosure list and then a docket number search. Copy the docket number from the foreclosure, paste it in. It'll give you all the records from that entire court case. You're going to look for the affidavit of debt, and that's going to tell you how much is owed on the property to the bank. That's going to tell you what the bank's going to bid on the property. So for this last property I won, that I won for $218, they only owed $106,000 on it. So I knew the bank's bid was going to be $106,000. There was 10 or 15 other investors there that made it bid up to 218. So, oh well there, but at least you know going into it what you're going to be looking at in terms of at least the bank bid or the bottom number of the auction. And it's possible where you're the only person there. The last house I bought before this one, where I won it for 230, the bank bid 230, but it was like 230 316. I bid 230 416, so $100 more than them, and I won it for that because they had no representative there. That was their reserve bid. That was the max they were going to bid. There was no one else there. So look at the foreclosures for sure. That's the most tried and true method. Make sure you don't get invested in the house for any reason other than the numbers. It doesn't matter if it's near your grandma's house, near the whatever. Location obviously matters in terms of the price and what the after repair value is, but factor that into the numbers as opposed to whatever sentimental feelings you have about any other value of the place. If it's going to be worth more when you fix it, then you bought it, and there's enough margin for you to fix it up, then it's the house for you,
So how are you running those numbers? When you see these foreclosures, are you running comps? And then, how are you estimating your budget and things like that?
So you find your after repair value first. You run comps, of course. You look at what's sold in the neighborhood recently, which MLS is great for, but Zillow is also perfectly usable. You can see, what's been sold. After you get it in, I always try to be conservative on my after repair value. I'm not, it could be worth it. No. What is it absolutely going to sell for? Give yourself a great margin of, 10, 20,000 under what you think it probably could sell for. So, because you don't want to be in a position where you're going to do all this work and then lose money or not make money, because it's a lot of work. I mean, for me at least, because I'm doing everything myself. I bought it in this last one in March. I sold it in August, and I worked 9 to 9 most every day except the weekends. It's a lot of work. Now, to make $100,000, that's worth it. But if you're only going to make 20 or lose 20, that's not worth it. So for sure, get your comps in, do some comparative values. You need to have someone who's going to be honest with you. If you're not going to do the work yourself, find an honest tradesman. And that's very hard, but I'm sure someone knows, has an uncle, or at least can refer you to somebody who's not an Angie's List generic, someone who's going to rip you off. Like, you need someone who's going to be honest with you about, well, it's probably going to need this, it's probably going to need that, or you need to know that knowledge yourself. But overestimate how much you think it's going to cost to fix as well, because you never know what problems you're going to encounter. Rotten sill plates could be asbestos, could be lead paint, etc. And then as long as your after repair value is greater than both your initial cost and your fix-up cost, I would say at least 40,000. If you're not going to make over 40,000 on the minimum, then it's probably not worth your time. That's just not enough of a margin. But anything over 40, if it's guaranteed and you've done the math well, I would say go for it.
Thanks for that. That's great advice.
And don't be scared. That's a big part of it. Is everything is risk. Getting up in the morning to go to work is risk. You might get hit by a semi-tractor trailer. I mean, you might as well risk it in terms of a pretty solid bet on yourself that you can control and the numbers make sense on, and risk it on, there's far more dubious investments.
Jonathan, what would you say is like the biggest lesson you've learned in real estate, in your greater real estate journey?
Don't be emotional. Don't buy emotional. When I say don't be scared, that doesn't mean be gung-ho and go for anything, but do so when you are informed and have the numbers correctly. Make sure you do your due diligence in terms of what the repair is actually going to cost. So another issue on this small place in Coventry was the box on top of the foundation. The box turned out that it was rotten, so we couldn't see it when we were looking at the house, because the pillars that it were on, the concrete was fine, but just on top of that. So if you don't know to look for something like that, definitely always go to your showings or go to your auctions with a tradesman, an uncle, someone who actually has done homework before and knows, work on a home and knows what they're doing and looking at and has your best interests at heart. Because like my experience with that first agent, I think they just wanted to sell something. They wanted to meet some quotas. They wanted to make their commission. And on a $72,000 sale, really, you probably only made like $1,000. I don't understand. But had they advised me better to look for, a better project or just think about it more, I would have bought 3 or 4 more houses through them. I would have done the rest of my transactions through them. Definitely don't be persuaded to work against your own best interests by someone who just wants to make a commission. So yeah, be wary of your realtors. Make sure your realtor's not just a yes man. Make sure that, this house is great, this is great. If they're not saying anything negative, that's not the realtor for you. I mean, there's very few situations where nothing is going to be negative.
I mean, everybody's house is lived in, right? And there are very few people who are keeping their house like a museum, It's lived in. People aren't checking their attics. They're not checking their crawl space. And probably the first time in 10 or 20 years that happens is when they go to sell a house and it's getting inspected. And I think we can all have grace for that. But, those are definitely things to consider.
Of course.
Jonathan, are there any real estate myths out there that you'd like to debunk?
There's of course the how much money you need to save up to buy your first home thing. I don't think that's, in my experience, what I've seen people need. I've literally helped a friend get a house for $0 out of pocket. Doesn't mean just go for it right away. Definitely make sure you're in a good financial position, have a good paycheck coming in, and are doing what you want to be doing. But yeah, you don't need a ton of money to start in real estate. Even flipping houses. Okay, here's a big one. I'm in a special position because I inherited money, and I understand that I've had an advantage for that in terms of flipping. However, anybody can do it. There's hard money loans, there's flipping loans, there's a million ways that you can go get that money. So the hard money route, for example, you'd put together the deal. You'd find your foreclosure auction that's coming up. You do the math. This is what it's going to be worth after. This is what I'm going to need to fix it, signed by your contractor. This is what it's going to cost initially. This is the max number I'm willing to go up to at this auction. You take that to a hard money lender, and there's tons of hard money lenders. Even people who do flips, once they have enough capital, become hard money lenders. In Connecticut, Two Guys Take on Real Estate is a good one. They do flips, and they also finance other flippers. As long as you go to a hard money lender with a deal that makes sense, and most of these people mostly do flips, so it's a good way to meet a mentor too, because they'll tell you whether or not the deal makes sense, whether or not you're both going to make money on it. And yeah, it's gonna be 20% interest and terrible time, terms, but you could do the deal with it, or you can't do it without it. So it really isn't that bad of a deal, bad of an option in my opinion. For example, if I had done this Windsor Locks house with a hard money loan instead of out of pocket, I would have made maybe $45,000 instead of $80,000. Now that's a huge difference, but if you're just starting out, you didn't have 45,000. Now you have 45,000. Like, it's do two or three, and now you don't need a hard money lender anymore. Anyone can start at real estate at any point in any time. I mean, if you can get a loan, you got to have good credit and income history and employment. So take care of the baby steps first. Establish yourself as a functional member of society. But anybody can get into real estate. Anybody can do flipping, and it doesn't have to be a full-time job. You don't have to work 9 to 9, like I said, especially if you're, not everybody can work on a house themselves. So if you got to find a deal where you can afford to pay somebody to do it for you. And there's a million deals like that. There's like this deal that I'm on right now. I got for 218 that's worth 350. I don't have to do anything myself there. I have it in the margins to pay everybody else to fix everything. I just want to, and I'll make more. But anybody can do it. You could be 80, you could be 20, doesn't matter.
And that's so cool to hear from you, because I often think that, I wish I had gotten into buying property when I was younger. I'm in my 30s now, and I'm like, when I see people in their 20s who are doing it and killing it, I'm like, I'm a little jealous, but whatever, can only look forward, can't look backward. And I'm so excited for, a younger generation of people getting into home ownership when they can afford it, getting into building like real wealth early. And I find that just so exciting.
I mean, the earlier you can get into it, someone's going to pay off your mortgage for you. You want to own it in 30 years instead of being dead. But at any point, it's better to start than not. The best time is yesterday. The second best time is today. So, like you said, you can't look back. Like you said, you can't look backward. You can only look forward. I advise anybody at whatever stage they're in to do whatever they can to better themselves. Your kids will thank you.
Yeah. John, do you have any habits or routines that help you stay successful in real estate?
Well, workouts have always been, I think when you choose the hardest part of your day, it makes the rest of it a lot easier. For me, that's been martial arts since I was a kid. I did CrossFit, I did wrestling in high school all throughout. I did boxing, and then I do MMA now to combine them all, as well as CrossFit. I competed in the CrossFit Games as a kid. I was actually 8th grade. I was 6th in the United States for one of the CrossFit Opens workouts. So I've
Wow.
always I've always loved workouts and exercise because they all cause endorphin rushes when you have the proper amounts of dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin in your brain. It's a lot easier to deal with the day-to-day struggles. Like when you have too much adrenaline in your brain from being sedentary and not working out constantly, it manifests itself in weird ways because your brain will release it at inopportune moments. Like anxiety, in my opinion, what an anxiety attack is when your brain releases all that adrenaline as a disproportionate response to a text you received. Or in real estate, it could be a deal falling apart, or like when it was 8 p.m. and I needed to put that deal together, as opposed to panicking and chewing my nails. I just got in the car, went there, and did whatever I could to get it done. And I think exercise is required for humans. We're hunter gatherers. I mean, you have to use it. Like, you will go nuts if you don't lose it. Cabin fever. People use what we call depression, I believe, is what cabin fever used to be. When you stay in your cabin all winter and there's no farming to do, there's no hunting gathering to do, you go nuts. So in our modern lifestyle, where we're sitting on our computers every day, sitting on our phones scrolling, you're going nuts. You have cabin fever. I mean, you need to get outside. You need to go move. You need to create endorphins. You need to, exercise. I feel like it helps with every area of life for sure. But real estate, especially, because it's very stressful to put together a deal sometimes. It's very stressful to deal with people making the biggest purchase of their life. Like I said, when you choose the hardest part of your day, when you go to CrossFit at 9 in the morning to 5 in the morning and do an hour's worth of really hard work, dealing with an annoying transaction is not that big of a deal. It won't stress you out as much. And it doesn't have to be physical. So a lot of people have physical limitations, and any activity that releases endorphins. I play music. I've played music since I was a kid. My mom's a guitar player and singer, and she taught me. So I'm actually playing at Brown's Harvest this Saturday and Sunday, 12 to 3 for Apple Fest. So anyone in Connecticut wants to come to Brown's Harvest in Windsor, Connecticut for Apple Fest, I'll be playing there 12 to 3 both days. I've had a residency there this whole season. I did Apple Fest, Sunflower Fest, Strawberry Fest. But music is another great way to release endorphins, is another great way to put yourself under stress, get in front of a crowd, and have it be, manageable and get used to that. You're going to be in front of people talking a lot in real estate. You're going to have to be confident in yourself. And I feel like music definitely plays into that. Being confident in front of a crowd plays into that. And just the endorphin rush in general for every reason, all the reasons I said before is beneficial. And I think having multiple hobbies, having multiple interests, not being a one trick pony. There's a quote that I gotta look up. It's master of all, or jack of all trades, master of none, but better than a master of one, is the end of the quote that nobody ever adds there. And there's so when you learn how to fight, you're going to be better at music because you'll understand rhythm, you'll understand confidence, and vice versa. When you learn how to play music, you'll understand how everyone has their own intrinsic rhythm, how everyone moves on a specific beat, and you can recognize their patterns and whatnot better. And the same is true in real estate. People, when they speak, people, when they lie, people, when they are negotiating, they all speak and they all have a specific pattern that they do. They all have tendencies. And I feel like when you recognize these things in one arena, when you have the ability to see them in one arena, you'll have a lot easier time recognizing them in other arenas. In the Art of War, there's a part where it talks about learning how to garden in order to learn how to use the sword. You shouldn't limit yourself to one thing. As many hobbies as you have, as many interests as you have, you're going to die. You really want to not experience them at some point in your life? Do everything. Do everything that you have any interest in, I think it all helps.
I think it is really important to have a full life. And, before we interviewed, that was something I noticed about you. I was like, man, Jonathan has a lot going on, like in such a good way. And because if any one of these things is a little like out of balance, maybe creating more stress than the others, I think like the other hobbies in your life, your other interests can kind of even out the scales, like you're not a one trick pony. Like you said, it's not all on this one thing to bring you joy. You have multiple things that bring you multiple levels of joy. And I think we owe it to ourselves and to our families to have lots of interests and be really curious about the world.
Absolutely. You're going to have failures and setbacks, and success isn't a straight line. Success goes up and down, and sometimes way down. Like I said, like with my first flip, I did not succeed there, but I did greatly with the second one. So it's just like music. Sometimes when you first play a song, you kind of suck, and then when you get better after a while. When you first start fighting, you get punched in the face a lot, and then it gets better. So I think, like you said, having the multiple, when you have a failure at one, being like, okay, it's not the end of the world. I still have other options. I still have other opportunities and chances, and I still have other reasons to be proud of myself. It's absolutely very helpful in managing those failures.
So, speaking of kind of challenges, this is a great segue. Are there any challenges you are facing in real estate, and how are you working to overcome them?
Biggest challenge right now is this house I just bought at foreclosure auction. I won it. I won the auction on the 21st of last month, and we're at the 30th of this month, still haven't closed. That's court approval, dragging their feet. Every transaction's different. I'm not exactly sure why in this one. It was a deceased person who their family didn't want to deal with the house because it's in need of repair. They owed $100,000 on it, so they just walked away from it. I'm not exactly sure what would be in the way, what the red tape is here, but it's usually about a month of waiting, chewing your nails after you win an auction. But this being over a month, I have talked to my lawyer more. I have called this other lawyer more. There's not so much I can do at this point other than wait and do my best not to be nervous and work on other things. But in the meantime, I've lined up all of my contractors. I've gotten all my quotes. I know exactly what the plan is. I have people willing to go over there with me and do the clean out, get the dumpsters and everything. So even when you're stymied, when you have no route forward, there's other things you can do to prepare. I've already prepared my exit strategy. I know what I'm going to do for it. I know what color the siding is going to be. That's currently the biggest challenge I'm facing and how I'm dealing with it, for sure.
I'm curious how you keep track of all of these things for your project. Are you an Excel spreadsheet type of a person? Is it some other program? Is it pen and paper? How do you manage all of these moving parts?
Depends on what I'm trying to do. So for just figuring out the numbers on a deal, napkin and pencil, napkin, piece of paper, I want to write it down to make sure the numbers make sense. For finding the deal, I have an Excel spreadsheet that I compare all of the foreclosure auctions coming up on. I have the ARVs, the rent in the area, the bank bid, a little picture of it, what I think it's going to need for a pair so that I can look them all side by side. It's whatever tool best fits that particular purpose. So for my expenses tracking for how much I've spent on the houses, that's just a notes list in my phone, because when I'm at Home Depot, I can take out my phone and add it to the notes list. Reminders, if I have a contractor coming on this certain day, that'll just be a reminder in my phone, because when you say, "Hey Siri, I have an appointment, yada yada," it puts it in reminders. And it just brought it up. But yeah, so that's just where it goes when I use my phone. So reminders is for that. Excel spreadsheet is for finding what deal I want to use, and then when I actually do the numbers, I'll write it down. I'll write it down on a piece of paper, because there's something with pen to paper that is just a little bit more retention in your brain when you write it down versus typing.
For sure. Yeah, I find that too. Jonathan, so we are wrapping up 2024. I'm curious how you are approaching your goals for the new year.
I like to start work and get as much progress done on this house before December as possible. Would also like to get a fight scheduled. Since I tore my ACL in 2021, I've been on the road to recovery and getting back to training, and I think I'm at a point now where I can schedule another fight and compete in that. Music's going well. I've got, gigs booked, but for my goals for this year is to get a fight booked, get that house at least to a point where I can post some pictures of it, because currently it's a hoarder house, so it's just all full of stuff
Oh,
currently, and
wow.
haven't been able to get inside it at all. So would love to get as far with that as possible. This will be my second flip this year, so my goals for 2025 hopefully would be to complete 2 flips, would be to get 2 complete cycles in, since I only did one full one this year. Would like to double that next year, and maybe, for the year after that. But long term, I'd like rental properties. The goal isn't just to keep flipping and taking the money out currently. As we were speaking about earlier, I have a lot of time ahead of me to where I can have someone paying off a mortgage and own that asset when I'm 50 instead of 80. So once I'm done with 3 flips, I think we're going to go 3-1. This is going to be my second successful one. So one more after this, and then the next one, I'm going to fix it up. I'm going to refinance it once I get a tenant in there, and then I'm going to keep the asset, have it cash flowing, and then continue to play with the money and do more flips. But as every couple flips, I definitely want to keep the asset and do a rental property. Not this year, but next one.
Well, that sounds incredibly exciting. I am so excited for you to get this done. I'm a little curious about your hoarder house. So, I don't know, maybe put it in your stories. We are always curious. There was a whole show about it. So, that'll make some really great before and after. So, I do hope you share it, because I love seeing that, and I know other people will as well. Jonathan, would you like to let people know how they can find you and how they can work with you?
Absolutely. So on Instagram, it's John Hayes Realty, JONHAYES Realty. For website, ctsfavoriterealtor.com. My phone number is 860-752-4485. And any way you guys could reach out to me, I would appreciate it. Would love to help anybody in the Connecticut area. And even if you're not in the Connecticut area and you just have a question, shoot me a question. I'll do my best to answer it and give you my best advice.
Awesome. Jonathan, thank you so much. We will link all that in the show notes so people can find you super easy. Thank you for being here with me today. It was so great to get to know you.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure talking to you.
Thank you for listening to the Closing Table podcast, brought to you by WindowStill. I'm your host, Kat Schooler. Please be sure you're following our podcast on Apple or Spotify. And if you're part of our YouTube audience, make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you're enjoying our podcast, please feel free to leave us a comment or review. It helps us find more amazing listeners like you. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.